bet people are gonna wonder about whether I know my folks or my family are watching this. It's like, how did you guys get here? Okay. Alrighty folks, if today's video wasn't exciting enough for you, your babe got load shedding while he was about to start filming. But I think I managed to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So today's topic is essentially my views on sex. This video is not meant to be crass or make light of anything surrounding this topic, but it's more so meant to kind of out the debate and kind of encourage discussion around the topic for the reasons I'll lay out. To begin with, it would make sense for me to maybe discuss why I chose the subject matter to speak on today as opposed to anything else. So the first reason is quite self-explanatory. Matters concerning sex in general are quite heavily exposed. You don't have to look very far, especially in today's digital world, to find any themes concerning sex. And I'm talking here about the practice of it, right? Look at any film, look at most popular music, look at even the porn industry and how big that is. People have a desire for acting it out to begin with, but also just have a general interest in themes surrounding it because it's such a broad subject matter. So that was the first motivating factor of me choosing this subject matter. The second would be that the old model of no, we discuss this in private, or we don't discuss it around grown-ups or what have you, it just doesn't seem to be applicable in today's world. This ties back to like the first idea that it's very exposed. In past times, maybe you would have to hear about or discuss these matters in private or away from, let's say, people of age or what have you. But in today's increasingly connected, increasingly accessible digital world, there's no way you can grow up, let's say, without having come across these themes in one or other form and the various perversions that come about from that. Continuing to act like focusing on a model that emphasizes silence or emphasizes shying away or tabooing the subject matter is going to be useful for any sort of progress, whatever that means. Always going to be useful for facilitating increasingly healthy sex lives going forward. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So that's the second reason I chose to discuss this. This largely sums up the first two reasons I chose, or the motivating factors for discussing this topic. I don't know if any folks or parents or people who are not comfortable discussing this kind of subject matter are watching this. Firstly, I don't really care. That's not my problem. But also I encourage you to really reconsider your views because it stands in the face of what's happening. So when your kids are like, oh, we don't care about this, or we don't think about it, mom, or whatever, and they go to each other's house, I don't know what you think they're doing, but it's not Bible study, okay? So to begin with, let's just tackle the low-hanging fruit. I get asked all the time whether I've done it or whether I've practiced or I've had sex before, and the answer is no, I haven't. And I don't know, people are always somewhat surprised at that. I don't know why. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment. It's very interesting to watch people's reactions. But anyway, I won't harbor on that too long because I don't really care about it much. But it is an interesting point to talk about, just virginity and the idea of that in general. My first view that I shall offer is that the act or the practice of sex is not trivial, which may seem like a trivial point to make, but I feel like in the convenience and the ease of today's digital world and with the accessibility of a lot of these things, it can get lost how consequential some of these actions actually are at the root. When you think about it, this act, this 3 minutes, whatever, this is where life comes from. Like, this is where babies come from, you know? And that's a lifetime worth of commitment, not to mention the possibility of transacting sort of diseases and what have you. and just the emotional and psychological effect that these sorts of exchanges have. I don't take it as, or at least I'm not convinced that hookup culture or whatever is as tax-free as it's presented. I think there's a lot more changing or a lot more happening psychologically than is given credit for. If not psychologically, practically, because your life changes when you have a kid, that kind of thing. My second view then follows on somewhat from the first, and it's that popularized discussions or conversations about sex are somewhat immature or presented in an immature fashion. They never really develop any sort of sound grounding for their philosophies on the practice of sex or just sex in general. It just seems so piecemeal, you know, or it's just so hot buttony. Like if you watch any sort of YouTube trending list, it's all smash and pass and all this kinds of thing. And I mean, that sure has its place for a certain audience, but it just doesn't resonate with me because, like I said, I don't find this to be a trivial matter. So like when you flow through a chart and then pick which, I suppose, partners or suitors, if you will, you would prefer to do this with, or you wouldn't prefer to do this with, it just starts to seem like it's a trivial matter. And to me, that's a little bit immature. My final view is that the demonizing of sexual pleasure or gratification is not particularly helpful because it doesn't do what it's intended to do, which is like discourage people from practicing sex or having sex. In fact, I would argue it does the opposite because people are more enticed by, let's say, the forbidden fruit or whatever. Even the idea of trying to stop people from doing it seems something that's not immediately justified. Obviously, practically as a kid, before you're financially sound or like have all your life kind of in a row, it wouldn't make sense to encourage people to do it. But that's not the overriding factor that's motivating people to do it. It's not financial stability or it's not practical considerations. It's generally just emotive or sensual pleasure. And to demonize that and act like it's not there, it just seems counterproductive because it is. If we're gonna have any discussions about the matter, I feel like we need to factor that in and factor in how enjoyable these experiences can be. Then we can have risk and reward discussions, right? We can have productive discussions about whether these actions are worth pursuing and what kind of consequences may follow as a result. Anywho, that kind of covers everything I want to discuss about this. I don't feel like it was too much of a shake. I feel like it's just a reasonable discussion. So I'll close with this. What are your views on sex and how do you approach the subject matter? Who do you talk to about these things? And what is your philosophy in general surrounding sexual relations? With that said, peace everybody.